What's up, guys? We're back again with another episode. And in today's episode, guys, we have someone who we'd like to use the word remarkable. Someone who shows us exactly what strength and courage is all about.
100%.
And honestly, guys, I hope you like this one. So without further ado, I'd like to bring onto the show Nina Aouilk.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you
very
so
much for coming
on.
Yeah. How you been anyways?
I'm good. I've been super busy.
I can imagine, yeah.
I don't really have 2 minutes to spare, to be honest with you, but I felt this was quite important because you are from my culture.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very
So
much.
I was pleased that 2 male men that do a podcast have reached out. So I wanted to be here, to be honest with you.
No, thank you so much. Because I
of course,
remember
man.
when I first came across your story, I know I saw it a couple of months ago, and I remember it was absolutely shocked. I was shocked, completely shocked. And I remember calling Seth and saying
When
to
you
him,
told
you know
me,
what?
yeah. I even said it to her off camera as well. I was like, halfway through, I had a lump in my throat. I couldn't even carry on watching it.
Yeah, honestly, like it
Can't
was
believe
something
stuff.
that, you know, even till now, I still don't, obviously we do believe it happened, but it feels like something, you know, when you were talking and describing the events, I was like, this is actually worse than a film.
Yeah.
Sometimes the events. So without further going on, moving on to what I'm talking about, I wanted to ask you about your upbringing, early years of your life.
Yeah.
And we'll start there, really.
Yeah, so my parents were, like I say, from India, from the Punjab. And I always say when they came over to this country, you know, they packed very tightly their beliefs. And I think people from India probably moved on with their mentality, but the ones that came over in the 60s
Yep.
really kept that cultural system going. They lived in little units together. So they didn't really integrate with the British system
Yep.
or allow their children to integrate. And when I was born, I'm the youngest of 3, so I've got 2 older brothers. And I think there's 5 years difference between one and 7 between the others, so I was born
Okay.
quite after.
Yeah.
But when I was born, I remember my auntie telling me that when I was born, nobody would pick me up. They weren't allowed to. Nobody actually saw my mother pregnant either, but she'd moved to Leicester from Birmingham and then moved back to Birmingham. And she had this baby girl, but nobody was allowed to touch her. And they said that I was an evil witch, like an evil entity, that I was carrying some sort of spirit, you know, like a putani is what they said,
Yeah.
which is like a ghost kind
Yeah.
of spirit. But they said that nobody was allowed to touch me. So I cried for days in my pushchair and soiled and fed. And in the end, I just gave up. And my aunt told me that I used to just play with my hands. I was quite happy then. I just entertained myself. I remember also, and I've not said this before, being in Birmingham and eating soil, you know, mitti,
Yeah.
because I thought it was food, because I used to watch my mum go and plant potatoes and carrots and bring them in, and I thought that was the food. And I remember my nana, my mum's dad, was there for literally days. He wasn't there for very long, but I remember him telling me not to do that. And incidentally, my nana was probably one of the nicest people I'd ever met. But he was only there for like a short time, and he went back to India.
You know, you said that they said that they weren't allowed to pick you up or touch you.
Yeah.
What was the reason behind that? Was that from the get-go, from when you were born?
I mean,
Or-
obviously, I don't know. I'm going on what people have told
Of
me.
course, yeah.
And it was just because I was this evil spirit, and nobody wanted a girl. They only wanted boys. I was one of the first girls born. We had other girls in the family,
Yep.
but I didn't even know about them. I've got my dad's eldest brother. I didn't even know he had an eldest brother. You know, I knew of so many chachithai, as we call it in our language, uncles, but I didn't know of this particular one because he had girls, and I've never said this is either. So I never saw them or never contacted them or never met them until a long time later on in life, when somebody said, you know, we have other cousins.
Yeah.
And I said, I didn't know that, but because they were all girls, everyone had cut them off. So, there was obviously a discrimination against girls. There was gender biased.
Yeah.
And my father just despised me, but my mother was always very angry about me, and that was my life. But I didn't know any different, so I just treated it as the way it was. But when we moved to Leicester, I was about 6 years old, and I did all of the chores, and you know what, kids do help their mums.
Of course,
Girls
yeah.
do help
Of
their
course they
mums,
do,
but
yeah.
not to the extent I did. And it was only recently, about 3 years ago, when I started working with a non-profit called Youth Underground. I always give them a shout out because they help children that have been trafficked.
Brilliant.
And
Big shout out to them.
and she explained to me that it was she explained to me that it was a form of modern day slavery, because I was kept in my room, and my room was very different to everyone else's. And You know, my mother's room was really pretty. She had like different shades of pink, and the carpet, my little feet used to play in the, you know, as soon as I went in to change the bed sheets, I used to just love
Soak
being on the
into them.
carpet.
Yeah,
I used to sort of
yeah.
wait for a couple of minutes, but I had a very short period of time that I had to change the bed sheets, do this. And, you know, my little 6-year-old hands barely could cover the mattresses because they're thick. You know, I can't do it now still. They spring up at me. So I really struggled as a child, but I also knew my room was very different. Like I say, hers was different shades of pink, mine was different shades of grey. And my brother one had like a blue door and the other had like a green door, but they were very glossy doors, very grand looking doors. And my door was a basic door from the shop, obviously, that they'd fitted. It wasn't sanded. And I had this habit of really pressing my ear against the door because I was listening all the time because I wasn't part of the family. So I would get scratches all over my face, which the school would have noticed, but no one ever asked, why'd you get scratches? But the splinters sometimes used to even embed themselves in my skin. And I was just a really young kid, but I was happy, you know, going down the stairs. When they'd said, come, and they used to call me Boothany, you know, they would never call me by name. It would always be, which come. I'd run and I'd be so happy. I'd be waiting for that moment. And I'd run down and I'd be like, ready, right, I'm going to make the food. And I would take extra care, extra love to make it for them because I wanted them to love me. And I thought maybe this is the way I'm interacting with my family. This is the way everyone does. I didn't know any different.
I was literally just going to say that because you feel like that is life because that's how you've been brought up.
Yeah.
That you don't know any different.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
So, you know, obviously, the one thing that hit me while you were talking was the fact that you remember everything so vividly.
Yeah.
Colour of doors and
I do.
even the texture of the door. And that shows you how much it's such a scarring upbringing. And honestly, I'm lost for words and just listened to the start of it. And obviously, when you started school and nursery and stuff like that, did you feel the difference seeing other kids?
I don't remember nursery, but I do remember my primary school because it was quite a walk away. And I remember meeting at English girl. There were 2 English girls. And the reason we became friends is because I was chosen to be, we all went into a hat to be May Queen. Right. You know, in those times, so going back in the days now, I'm a lot older than a lot. But we would be chosen to be a May Queen. And I didn't get chosen to be the May Queen. I got chosen to be one of the helpers. So they dressed me up. And I remember one of the teachers gave me a flower for my hair. Yeah. But these 2 girls, we ended up becoming friends, and they continued to be my friends because it was middle school and primary. So the girls used to teach me what came on the television. They would teach me the songs. Yep. And I remember they would give me Smarties on the way sometimes because I didn't get food. You know, my relationship with food from a very young age was bad. I would cook for everyone, but I didn't think I could eat. And sometimes if I was clearing up and they had left a little bit of food, I would push it up my sleeve and take it up to my room. But what I used to eat was Bounty bars and sweets because my dad had under the stairs, he had a cupboard where he would stock peanuts and sweets for his bars and pubs. Yeah. And I would be in charge of cleaning that room, and I could easily slip a Bounty bar and I could eat half of a Bounty bar and that would last me 4 days. And I just got used to sort of nibbling on these little things. And I think sugar also, you know, it gives you that kind of high, it keeps you a little bit of energy. Of and I didn't really ever think about what about me, am I going to eat? Because my mother never said, you know, you might as well have something. Nothing like that. It was always there was a lot of aggression, which I think our culture holds anyway.
100%.
So here I find it so hard, obviously, with fathers, you hear it quite often. But when you talk about a mother doing that to her daughter, I feel like it's just unheard of. Literally.
I think mothers are part of the problem. A lot of people say, you know, maybe she was unable to speak up, maybe she'd had a background like that. But I know her father, and I've recently reconnected with her side of the family in America, and they are her brother's children. And I got a lot of backlash from social media saying, why do you even need to go and see them? But we all crave love. I crave love. You know, I still want that family acknowledgement. I know I'm a good person. Why shouldn't I have that? Of course. And they were disgusted when they found out what they found out. They were really upset. So in a way, it was kind of healing for them too. But I saw her brother who looked just like my nana, my granddad, and I just really loved being just sat next to him. I felt such love. And my daughter was with me, and she said that she really could feel that energy, that compassion from them. So I don't think she got it from them, but she was married. They got married so early back then, 14, 15 sometimes. Yep. So she became, I suppose you could become the people you hang around with, and she was with my father all the time. So she had that aggression, I feel, from him. Maybe frustration because he was playing around, he was seeing other women. Maybe that was also part of her.
It's also a big cultural thing as well, because back in the days, a lot of people, especially Pakistan, India, everywhere like that, they all used to do that. Once you're married back then, it's not like how it is now. What the man says goes, and even if the woman has a say, they're not allowed to say it anyways.
I'm going to disagree with that because it's still like that for a lot of people now.
Of course, of course, I know what you mean.
What he's trying to say, we don't obviously know people because we live a different life.
Like
I'm glad you're different. Maybe you'll pave the way for the new generation, and they will see how you behave.
I'd like to think so. Yeah, hopefully.
I think even now, obviously, it also depends on the way you're brought up, the friends you're with, and when all your friends are like happily married, you don't really know what's happening behind closed doors. So I do kind of understand what you mean, because everything people put up, social media especially, it's always the fun part.
100%.
No one really wants to put up the fights, the arguments, the disagreements. So I do understand what you mean by that. I think what Seth was trying to say was naturally, I think it's back then when
it was worse. It was
worse. That's
known
it,
to be worse.
Because nowadays, like yourself, you can come out and speak about it after all these years, and
which I think is amazing. The courage that you were just going to say. It's absolutely amazing that you've actually come out and spoken about it, because a lot of people probably would have thought they would have gotten a lot of backlash. Or
well, I do.
I mean, I know you do, but you're not. Yeah, of course.
And
it's not easy.
People think it's something that I'd love to tell my story, and I say, well, yeah, if you want to, it will help people, but it's not as easy as you think. I get a lot of hate. I get a lot of death threats, as you know. I take security with me, as you know. On Monday, the event, I had 2 people just in case somebody. It takes just a couple of seconds for someone to stab me, and that's the thing. And I don't. Part of me sometimes is, I'm protected by a higher source. Nothing's going to touch me because I'm doing God's work. I feel all the universe's work, whatever you want to see it as. But I'm here to serve others. But I know also that I'm treading on some people's toes, and they don't like it. They're not happy with me at all. And I'm talking about South Americans, especially the Middle East. I get a lot of death threats from the Middle East. My LinkedIn, they were sending me pictures of me decapitated. They'd actually created this image, and they were sending that, and LinkedIn stepped in. They were really good and put a filter on my account so people can't send me these images. But it's disturbing, naturally.
When was the... Oh, go on.
No, I think what's even more disturbing is what you've come out and done is, it's like... you've been a role model to so many people that are going 100%. Through similar events in their life. So I don't understand what their thought process is to attack you. And, I don't see why they've done that, because all you've literally done is told your story. You haven't called no one out. You haven't said, I want, X, Y, and Z. You haven't sworn at no one. You just told them your side of the story. So I don't understand why it's got to the point of people giving you death threats. I think
it's a case of staying quiet. We often, victims will stay quiet because they believe no one's going to believe me. They think there's a stigma and shame, which there is. It's izzat, the
of
respect.
Of course.
And I just say it as it is, and people say, well, you just say it. And I say, well, because I shouldn't be the one who's ashamed. Those people that have committed those cultural crimes, they should be ashamed.
Of course.
And if we start talking out about it, we take away that stigma. I've done nothing wrong. I was a child throughout my life. I was just faced with difficult times and traumas, and those hands that were supposed to protect me were the very ones that held me down. They shouldn't have done those things.
Can I ask, when was the first time you actually decided to speak about your story? And
when I found out about my sister, I became homeless in 2015 from domestic violence. I'd gone from frying pan to fire, not knowing what I was doing with my life really, and I was renting a place from somebody. He said I could stay there, but he raped me and I ended up getting pregnant, and because of our culture, I thought, I can't go around having children with everyone, I'm just going to stay, and I said I wanted to get married. He said, you're not good enough to get married, and I thought, of course I'm not good enough. He said, you're too fat, you're too ugly, there's nothing good about you, who would want you? And I thought, yeah, he's right, who would want me? Because a lot of the time I didn't want me. Only recently, after 50 years, I've decided, yeah, of course I want me. I love who I am. But I believed everything everyone told me. So it was when I found out that my father had had an affair with somebody, a Polish lady, and that he had abducted a girl. And it really didn't sink in, because I was literally homeless and I had nothing. I'd left a 7-bedroom house. I'd left my businesses that I was running, my 8 businesses, 7 businesses. And suddenly I was with nothing, just my youngest son's hand in mine, and we had nowhere to go, not a penny to rub together. I just didn't think it through when I left. It kind of happened in quite an urgent state where I had to go. And the police found me and said, look, we need to talk to you, because somebody had given me shelter. She said, you can stay in my house.
Yep.
It was temporary, but I think she would have kept me there as long as I wanted. But she was with me and the police turned up and they said that your father abducted a girl. And it just wasn't sinking in until I'd actually gone and lived in a house that I'd worked really hard. I literally did every job I could. I packed clothes in Leicester, because it's a rag trade, and I used to sell them machinery that was worth thousands of pounds. I used to sell them the ink, the paper, the whole packaging deals. That was my business, but I went in the same factories and stood for £2 an hour packing equipment just so I could earn enough money to go to a landlord, because they won't rent to me, to say, look, I'm going to pay you 2-3 months up front, let me stay with you. And that's what happened. But when I got to the place, it sunk in that I've got a 6-year-old sister, I've got a little sister, and it sunk in that the police wanted a character reference, and I said, okay, and I told them what happened with me. And I realised, thinking about my own daughter at 6, I don't know if you've got daughters, but or a little sister,
Of course, yeah.
It's like I saw my daughter as that person, and he had taken, her name's Julia, he had taken her from her mother, he'd got the mother drunk, taken her by force and got onto a plane from Heathrow, I think, to Romania, and then from Romania to another place, I think it was Poland, and then from Poland somewhere else, and then to India. But the fact is, no one stopped him. He didn't know who she was. He didn't have a relationship with her. Exactly. He was a stranger. I was terrified when at 21 when they tried to kill me, so I can't imagine how she felt. And my heart actually broke, and I felt guilty, I'll be completely honest. I felt guilty that I had never held my dad accountable, and he'd done it again. And she was the reason I started speaking up, and I said to myself, I'm stubborn. I said I would do 100 podcasts or messages to the world, and 100 people would hear it. If it's only even 100 and one person understands what an honour killing is, if one person understands how girls are treated differently in my culture about human trafficking, then maybe that'll make a difference. I didn't really know where this was going. I just knew I had to speak out. And I found out that where he'd taken her is a place where they harvest organs. So the chance of me finding her was getting smaller and smaller over the years. I mean, I hold hope, because I know with the non-profit I work with that sometimes they will come back as adults, but they're very broken adults. And I don't know, she'll be 16, I guess, now, but the mother hasn't got her. And even when I've done interviews, people have been quite cruel and said, we know where she is. Here's a newspaper article. And there's newspaper articles saying she's reunited with her mother. I've contacted people that know my father that speak to me secretly, and they've said, no, she's not here. So my heart's constantly being pulled, because I would just love for her to be alive, even if she doesn't want to know me, that's fine. I just need her to be alive and well.
Bloody hell. That was hard to listen to, that.
Yeah, of course.
So Nina, obviously, you had to continue, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just can't understand why. Obviously, this is the $1 million question: is why someone would even want to do that. First of all, to their own daughter, and then seeing how everything played out in her life to a certain point, and then go do it again.
I think it's what Nina's saying, because you probably got not comfortable, but you probably thought like he would get away with that again. Or maybe it became a habit, maybe.
He did really, didn't he? He did really get away with it, because Julia's gone. He went into prison for a short period for abduction. With the cultural influences, he was released very early. And he was celebrated. The people celebrated him in the community. You've done really well. You've kept the izzat, you've kept the respect, you've kept the honour. What honour is there in doing that to a child? I just can't understand it myself. I know, had she been born a boy, her life would be very different. If I'd been born a boy, if I was the youngest of 3, my life would have been very different.
If you don't mind me asking, you said you had 2 older brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was Dave?
Yeah, then they didn't have a role in this, or didn't help you or anything?
No, my brothers were involved in my attempted honour killing. When I did, going back to my childhood, my brothers didn't speak to me often. My eldest brother would win me just by... I wasn't allowed to look up, or like I'm making eye contact with you guys now. I wasn't allowed to do that. I wasn't allowed to talk to them. So if I had accidentally looked up, or he thought I'd looked up, he would win me. And they were really big. My families are huge. And I was quite a little girl then. So it was always that anger thing, that control thing. And
Yep.
I was almost regarded as the servant, you know, and I should not be seen. I just needed to be out of the way. I wasn't treated the same as them, and my brothers had no emotional connection with me at all.
So Nina, for obviously people that are, you know, watching this podcast and they probably haven't heard your story before, could we rewind it back to the first time where, you know, you felt the abuse from home on a physical level? Because obviously verbal's one thing, but then it got to the point where it started getting physical with yourself.
Yeah, I was always mentally and physically abused. You know, I was always punched and kicked or slapped. That was just part of my
Normal.
life. I just knew that, you know, on the way to school, I know my mum used to sort of slap the back of my head, and I thought she was doing it out of endearment to start with, until the slaps got harder and I realised she was just egging me to leave quickly because I was dragging my heels. And to me, like, life was normal until I got to 14. And this is difficult because I literally only admitted this to myself. I actually told my best friend 3 years ago, because I couldn't keep it in me anymore. It was something that was just dragging me down. And, you know, you sort of often put the worst memories away in a little box and you don't want to go back there. And you think about, how will my children react if they know this? And how will the people that I care about react if they know this? But I just got to a point where I just couldn't hold it in anymore. It was mentally destroying me. But when I got to 14, my job, as I said, was to cook for everyone. My dad used to go to the pub on a Friday or Saturday, and it was a common thing back then. He would bring back all of his friends. We don't say names, we say uncle, Uncle G.
Yeah.
We say that out of respect, but they're not related. You know, people think that but they're definitely not related to us. And on this occasion, I had started to hit puberty. I was growing, you know, I'd got taller, my periods were starting. And I know it sounds horrible to say, but I think men sniff this in a way. They almost know when a girl has got to this age. There's something psychologically that they connect with. And I came down one night, as my mum used to just poke me to wake me up. I ran down, made the rice, made the chicken, made the dal, which is lentils, and the roti, which is chapatis. And I took this tray, and I always talk about this tray because it's so significant to my childhood. It was like a massive white tray with a silver lining, and it was just so big. You know, it was just huge. But I used to take everything on the tray, carefully put it down. I was just a small girl, you know. And I gave them the food as I did, and my job was to wait. My dad didn't like mess. He wanted everything cleared up. So I sat on the bottom steps, and we had these huge wooden stairs that would open up, and my dog would sit at the top and watch me. And she was there, she was watching, and I was sitting down at the bottom, just literally kicking my slipper off and then rolling it back in with my toes, you know, entertaining. But something felt odd that night. You know, my stomach was churning and my head was just like banging. It was almost like my body was rejecting me going back in there. And when I did go in there, I could hear how loud they were. They were being very vile with what they were saying. I understood Punjabi, so I knew they were being disrespectful. But I just went in with my head down, as I did with the big tray. And my father, he was the first person to grab my arm. He grabbed my wrist. And when he grabbed it so tightly, the tray fell down. I didn't know what was happening. You know, I didn't understand. I just literally closed my eyes, and he picked me up because he was an ex-professional wrestler. And he threw me onto a low table, and the plates went flying. And he was the first person to me, but it wasn't just a rape. It was like an attack. It was like a savage sort of frenzied attack it was brutal to the point where, you know, I was thrown from table to floor, from person to person. They would bite me. They were spitting on me. They were obviously raping me in every way, shape and form they could. But it got to a point where I didn't know I didn't know whether I was going to survive this. And I remember passing out, and I would come to, and there would be somebody else there. And there was one particular person who stayed. A lot of them went, but they were almost using their whole energy on me. It was like it was very aggressive and very violent. And I just remember waking up, and I was literally in a bath of my own blood. I had no bottoms on by this time. My hair was all messed up and everything, and I had food on me as well, and blood. And I remember being literally grabbed from my shirt that I was wearing and pulled again up by this one person who just didn't want to leave. And I think I passed out in the end because I just don't remember anything. And I was very lifeless. That's the only way I can describe myself, on this carpet. And I woke up the next day, I don't know what time, I have no idea. But I remember my mum opening and closing the door, banging it to wake me. And I remember the first thing I looked at was the mess. You know, I didn't think, what's happened? I'm hurting, I'm in pain. I was in a lot of pain, but I didn't acknowledge it. All I thought about is, I'm going to be punched and kicked and told off because there's so much mess. And I was panicking. I was in almost a frenzied panic, thinking, I can't do this, I can't clean it, it won't come out. And I tried to get up and it was difficult, but I managed to get up. I had no clothes on, and, you know, from bottom down, I had nothing on. And I asked my mum, I asked her if I could have a wash. She said, have a shower. And I wasn't allowed showers. The rest of the family were allowed showers because it was electric, and they used to complain that I would use all the electric and the bill would be high. So they used to give me a bucket, and I used to fill the bucket up and have a shower, you know, a bucket bath, baldy bath. Yeah. But this time she said I could have a shower, and I was thinking, wow, okay, this is going to be helpful, but it stung. You know, that water on my skin was stinging, and I wanted then to have a bucket bath, but then I was scared if she heard me fill the bucket up, I would be in trouble again. So I was really in a lot of pain, and when I came out, she'd left my brother's old pyjamas there. I put them on, and I couldn't go down physically. I really didn't want to. My legs were shaking, but I went down and I cleaned up. She gave me a bucket and she gave me a sponge, and I cleaned the whole thing up. And then I asked, please, can I go and lie down? I'm not feeling too well. And she just pointed to the stairs, and I went. And I think I was in bed for a couple of days, if I'm being honest. I just wasn't okay.
I'm assuming at this point your mum knew what had happened.
I personally feel everybody in the house knew what had happened, because they were exceptionally loud, and our house wasn't made of soundproof or anything. You know, it was. Of course, yeah. It was. You could hear people. I could hear people when I was a kid sitting with my ear against the door. You could hear, but no one spoke about it. It was like nothing had happened. I wasn't supposed to speak about it either. I knew that without them telling me. But I remember laying down and thinking, I don't want to be here anymore. You know, I didn't feel like me anymore. I just felt literally like someone had taken me and snapped me in half, and I just wished I wasn't around.
It's a lot for, especially at the age of 14, for someone to go through. You know, there's no point me even asking the question at that age why you didn't decide to run away or call the police or anything like that, because I'm assuming that you did not know any better. If anything, you thought that was normal, and that is how life was.
I knew it wasn't normal. This thing I knew wasn't normal, but I didn't know what to do. I was a scared little girl. I was too quiet. Yeah. I was too scared. I was too little. You know, in my mind, I was just a little girl. I didn't understand what sex was. We don't talk about these things.
No, we don't know.
You know, if something comes on the television, I know people just look up at the ceiling. I remember taking a train once, and somebody was kissing once on the television, and I felt ashamed. And I was taking the train, and I'd caught it at the corner of my eye, and I remember everybody else in the room looking around like something, you know, was really bad. We don't talk about periods. We don't talk about if we're feeling sad. And I felt very alone. I just felt like there was nobody. At that point, I kind of used to believe in God, because we were brought up to believe in God. And I remember having many conversations with God. And I remember saying, why am I so evil that you've done this to me? Because I didn't understand why it should happen.
It's sometimes even hard to talk about. There's so many questions that are coming through my head right now, but I don't even know how to say it.
You know what strikes me most? What strikes me the most is just to think that a father could, you know, being a father myself, I just can't believe you wouldn't even, you know, you shout at your children and feel bad.
Of course,
maybe
exactly.
You just shout at them, and to think what that must have been like for you, I'm honestly so sorry. And
the other thing is you said you were brought up to believe in God. I'm assuming so your father and your mother obviously believe in God, and they prayed?
You just know they didn't pray. You know, Sikhism's You know, when I was a little girl,
Yeah.
and sitting in my room, I read the Quran, I read the Bible, I read the New Testament, I read the Gita, I read the Guru Granth Sahib, I read every scripture because I was looking for an answer.
Of course.
I was looking for help. And I know that everything it said in each of those scriptures I was doing. I wasn't cheating, I wasn't lying, I was being a good person, and I still am.
Of course.
But I think the answers really weren't there. I think the answers were always in me anyway. I just thought there was a way out through them. And they didn't practice that, you know, going back to my own religion, and I'm not super religious. I don't even talk about God normally, but if you are talking about my religion, we're all one. There's no difference between you and me. We're all one.
Of course.
And we are supposed to be of service to others, and we're supposed to love one another. If I say I love you, you're going to maybe find it weird. But I do it all the time to people, and I say, you know, I love you. And they say, well, how can you love me? You don't know me. But I'm extending my love because I have so much in me to give. But our culture doesn't teach us to receive love. It's almost like we don't know how to love, or we don't know how to receive love. And it's one of the most basic human rights that we have to give to one another. We should be in that compassionate state, but there's no compassion anymore in this world.
That's the main thing, what you just said there as well. It's not even about religion. It's the culture. The culture is to blame, but
Yes, cultural.
it's yeah,
No religion
no religion.
teaches that.
I mean, a lot of things that, you know, I've done so many interviews, and a lot of people say, oh, she's Muslim. It doesn't matter if I am. It doesn't matter if I'm not. It doesn't matter, you know, if I'm Christian. And then they say, well, we shouldn't let these people into our country. Now that, again, it doesn't matter whether you've let us into your country. I'm born and bred in the United Kingdom. I probably speak English better than most people that are white British. And I'm not having a go at them.
Of course.
But I'm saying that you're saying that send them back. You're saying she must be Muslim, but you're forgetting that I'm talking about an honour killing, that I'm talking about a cultural crime, that I'm talking about sexual abuse, I'm talking about domestic violence. Now,
Absolutely.
if you send me back, it's still going to exist.
Of course.
So that should be the emphasis of any interview that I do. You know, I give my whole heart when I'm sitting here talking to anyone. I literally
100%.
say, I cut myself open so other people can heal. I take myself back to that 6-year-old girl sitting in her room, you know, with nothing, with literally nothing. And I do that so I can bring that emotion forward, that message forward of how I felt and how other people are feeling. So whoever's listening to this, I just want some more compassion. Just thinking about my colour of my skin or my religion doesn't equate to the issues that I'm raising, which is that this abuse has to stop.
100%.
Nina, I wanted to ask you another question because obviously I've seen all your interviews, or most of them, and there was something in one of them you said where there was a situation where you had to get married, and I remember your father at the time said, you know, get married to someone I know, and he had a son. And do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah,
Because
I mean, that was the next
forced
stage of
marriage.
my life, really. That was part
Yeah.
of my journey. And what happened after the rape was I got pregnant. I didn't know, obviously, who had got me pregnant, and they took me to a clinic in the West Midlands. I remember being in the back of the car. My parents are arguing, you know, literally arguing about this whole thing. My mum's obviously not very happy. My dad's not happy. I remember getting there. I remember every single thing. And my memory sometimes fails me, but on these occasions, it's obviously etched so deep.
Of course.
And the one thing I talk about isn't the procedure, or that I'm lying on this rollable bed where they push you around. It's not that. It's afterwards when I'm sat on a grass verge and there are women sitting around me and they're older than me. I'm the youngest child. I'm a child. Yeah. But no one questions it. And we do it all the time. We see things that are wrong and we just turn the other way because it's not our problem. Somebody else will deal with it. But if one of those women that had been through that situation said to me, you shouldn't be here, you're so young, what's going on, and reported it or helped
100%.
me, I may have changed my whole dynamic of my life going forward. I can't change what's happened, but maybe going forward I could have. And nobody did. But there was one lady and she gave me a cup of tea. And, you know, and I'd never been given anything, but she actually gave it to me with a biscuit. And I thought, wow, this is huge. Someone's giving me something. How bad can I be? But it's what she did with her hand. She stroked it on my head like a mother would. And that for me really got to me because I thought, I want to be like her. Yeah. I want to be kind. And I thought also that how bad can I be? Because she hasn't caught anything. She's not dropped dead. And I started to really think about it, but that lasted for a tiny period, that thought, because as soon as I was in the car, my parents were complaining about me that, you know, I don't know, if there's an Asian person out there, mothers have a way of dramatizing everything. And, you know, my mum was slapping herself on her hands and everything, saying that she was just wanting to die herself. And my father was saying he's going to have a heart attack because of me. And I'm in the back feeling really bad because I've caused this. It's my fault. I've caused this for them.
That's what you're thinking at that time, I'm assuming, yeah, because there's no way that could be your fault in any way, shape or form.
But as a 15-year-old child,
Of
that's what you
course,
think.
yeah.
You think, I've done this to my parents.
Especially a 15-year-old that's been enclosed to all this.
Brainwashed into thinking that is normality.
It's normal.
Yeah, and we, you know, I was born to serve, and I was born to serve them. You know, everything is about my parents, their respect, to make sure they're fed, to make sure they're well. It was never about me. I felt like I was there for their reasons.
And in a weird way, there's nothing wrong in thinking that, but then they're supposed to shower you with love in return as well.
Absolutely.
And that's the part that was missing. There's no harm in thinking I'm here to serve my parents and, you know, to cook and clean and just live for them and not even think about myself. But then that's their role to come in now and think about you. And it's like what you said, where that woman had just touched you on your head, that little thing where it's an unknown woman, you've never met her in your life before. She's given you that moment in life that you've not had in the past 14 years. And look how significant that is. But look at the situation that you was in where she did it.
No, and one little
hard.
act of kindness goes
Of course,
very far, which is why I say to people, just be kind. It's a huge,
100%.
it's a huge strength if you can do that. It ended up in a situation where I tried to kill myself because I just wanted to end my life. And, you know, back then we had paracetamols in tubs, not packets. And I took the whole tub thinking I just have to lie down, I'll be gone. And I was happy to do that, I'll be honest with you. I completely didn't want to live anymore. I didn't like who I was. I almost felt like I'd caused everybody a problem the day that I was born. And it didn't work. And then my father and mother were really unhappy. But one day I sat, as I did, scrunched up next to the door, you know, just sat there as I listening. And I heard my dad really shouting, I'm happy, oh my God, I'm so happy. And I never understood the word happy. I really didn't get the word happy. But I thought, oh wow, he seems really happy. He keeps saying it, you know, bokushia, bokushia. And I thought, I wonder what's going on. Maybe something's happened or someone's coming. That's what I thought. And somebody was coming. I was called downstairs. And when I went in, I had my eyes down again. And my legs were shaking because I did not like going in that room. And I could hear one of the men that were obviously my dad's friend. I've seen him before because they came every Friday. I continued to make their food every Friday after what had happened. I had to go in with that tray and I would hold that tray extra tight in case my father was going to pull it from me. But it didn't happen again. But it made me think it was, you know. And
psychological trauma in it, of course.
It was torture. It really was mental torture. And it was him, and he said that we've got a solution. They sat me down, they put a chunni, which is like a scarf over my head. They gave me sweets, they put money in my lap, and my brother came and sat, they took photos. I didn't know what was happening because I'd never seen anything like that before. None of my brothers were married. And then I realised that there was some sort of wedding talk going on, and I thought, well, who's getting married? Still not understanding anything. You know, and I look back at those photos and I look so young. I look so young and lost and scared. And I really don't like looking at the picture because it really upsets me.
Of course.
But I knew that something was happening, and I heard them saying, well, he's got an English girlfriend, she's white British, and, you know, people are going to find out, so we're going to marry her to my son, but she's going to be there for me. And my new father-in-law-to-be said that I would be there for his sexual reasons, that I would be there for him in front of everyone. And my father said, it's okay, that's fine, as though it was okay. And he literally handed me to this man. And my mother-in-law said that she expected me to do all of the food, all of the cleaning. My mum sat and said, well, she does that here. You don't even have to speak to her. She'll do everything. And they said, well, we need her to get a job because we need money. And my father said, well, I'll give you money now. And they started to argue, you know, about how much they were going to get from my parents. And they said, we will only take her if you give us this much money. And my father's a wealthy man, I'm not going to lie. And he gave them money, he gave them gold. You know, our gold is worth a lot of money.
Of course.
He gave them clothes, and this whole system of what they wanted, and it kept going up. You know, I remember them coming back a week later. No, we want more. We want more. And when we got to the wedding day, it was a really lavish affair. I had got, for the first time, something sent from India. You know, it was an Indian suit that is traditional for your mum's brother to give something for you to wear. And I was really happy. It smelled different, and I thought this was what India must smell of. But it was a very short-lived moment. You know, I had the wedding ceremony and I was sent home, and nobody questioned where the bride is, or I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be there. And I remember sitting in this Indian suit at my house thinking, what do I do now? It's so empty, it's so quiet. But nobody came days before the wedding. You know, I watch these Indian films now, and they've got wedding ceremony lasting a week, but nobody came. Nobody came to do the mendi, which is the thing on your hand, you know. The henna. I didn't have any of that. I didn't have anything. It was just the wedding day, and I went. I got ready and I went. And
what age was that, sorry?
I was 16 turning 17, so I was literally nearly 17. And the wedding, you know, when I got to my in-laws' house, they had guests. It was a very small house compared to my father's. There was no grand, big wooden staircase. There was a very small sort of chalet type house in a very small area, as in the houses were all small, so it was terraced. And I remember walking in, and I was wearing my suit and my gold, and my mother-in-law said in front of all of the guests, take your clothes off. Wow. And I didn't know what to do, because I thought, well, I don't know what underwear I've got, because you think about the stupidest things.
Of course, yeah.
And I thought, I don't really want to do this, and I wish they'd turn around. So I took them off. And she gave me something old to wear from her daughters. I put it on. She took away all of my clothes, and she showed me this little room, and it was literally as wide as this table, maybe a little bit wider. And there was like a tiny little bed they'd put in there with, and I'm shaking at the minute, but there was like a cupboard type thing. And she said, this is where you'll be, and there was no door. And I didn't understand why there was no door, but obviously it became apparent later on the door wasn't there so that my father-in-law could come and abuse me whenever he felt like it. And he would come downstairs, and he had a turban. He was part of the Sikh temple. They have 5 people that are they're called the Panj Pyare. They're the ones that everyone respects, you know, at all of the events. He was one of those. So he was very well respected. Wow. And I thought, well, who's going to believe me? Because everyone respects him. You know, he's this religious person, and he would pray in the front room, and then he would come and meet me, and then he would shower and go to work. And you know, I didn't know what to do, and I went through that for 4 years. But it was a point of I couldn't call anyone. There was a phone in the front room, and that, you know, we didn't have mobile phones back then. He would tie my ankles up with metal coat hangers out of almost a control-driven way, that he could show me that he was in charge. You know, I'm in charge, and they would strip me, him and his wife, and they would leave me on in the middle of the floor with my ankles tied, and if I tried to move the ankle end of the coat hanger would dig into my skin, and it was really quite sharp. So I didn't move, and I would just soil myself there and sit there until they came. I wouldn't even cry, because I was scared if they saw that I had tears that they would then beat me, because they would beat me a lot. And it was a really different kind of abuse that I engaged and I had cast upon me in their house to my parents. My parents' house seemed mild compared to the abuse I was getting here. And my mother-in-law was equally as cruel. And people make the mother-in-law jokes and the in-law jokes, but it's in our culture, they play a really big role in the deterioration of mental health for the brides and often the grooms. You know, they control situations to a point where they ruin a happy family life.
Of course. I
didn't speak to my partner, well, my husband, that, you know, he lived his own life, but my mother-in-law, she really had a way of making me feel like nothing. And I'd had very low self-worth, but she would say things to me about my looks or that I was too fat, and she would make me feel so irrelevant that I just couldn't cope with it mentally. I really struggled. And when I would, and I've said this before, but obviously not on this, but when I would cook for them, I would sometimes, because it was a new place, I thought I could eat. And I remember putting food on a plate, and only small portions, not to be greedy. But she took the plate and threw it in the bin, and she forced my head into the bin. She told me to eat half the bin. And I started to, because I was scared of what she said. And I was hungry. But then I thought, you know what? I just don't need to eat. And I just gave up. Sorry.
That's why I take your time.
Even just hearing it, I can't even imagine. No.
Do you want some water?
Yeah.
No.
You sure?
See, sometimes when you hear these things, you just completely lose the whole track. They say interview, you know, or it's like a podcast. I'm flooded with emotion right now.
You almost feel bad to carry on asking what happened because you don't even want to hear no more. Personally,
It's so true.
You know, not in a rude way. It's
See, the way that
not
I
nice.
actually know the whole story,
Yeah.
and hearing it again, it's just like brought it all back again. And I remember at the time when I was watching it, I was absolutely hit for six, and now to hear it like straight from you, and it's just unbelievable how people can do that to people. It's absolutely insane.
It's one thing hearing it, but then actually looking across the table and knowing someone's actually gone through it is completely, it's literally my body
And
gone
still
cold.
going through it. You know, people are still going through this.
You know, at this point when you obviously were getting abused by your father-in-law, were you not talking to your own family at the time, or was it a complete cut
No, in
off?
our culture, I don't know, it's maybe changed now, but I think it hasn't much.
No.
When you're married, you're someone
You're
else's daughter. You're not their problem or their daughter anymore. And my father made it very clear that I was no longer his daughter. But I met somebody at work, you know, because my in-laws were so greedy. I was like one of the first 17-year-olds that are Asian or person of colour, or however you want to put it. I know that word offends people. I don't know why, but it does. But I was the first person that looked like me to get a job that's not non-white British for a large corporation and be a manager at the age of 17. And I was very ambitious because I thought the more money I make, the more I can please them. So I was a people pleaser, you know. And I was ambitious because I wanted to do the best. So I might be seen, I might be heard, I might not be
Respected,
looked as badly. And, you know, there were lots of opportunities and I took all of them, but they asked me to earn more money because my money was being controlled. They had a bank account, a joint bank account, it went go into their bank account. I didn't see any money, and I was earning a lot back then, you know, even now it's a decent wage. But they said, go find another job. You can do some packing in a factory or something. So I found a telesales job, which I actually really liked because it meant I was calling people and speaking to them. And I found it really easy.
Yeah.
I'm a people person. I had that banter, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, to be able to get those appointments. And it was easy. And they were getting work from me. They were getting a lot of money from me. And it was at this place I met a girl, an Indian girl, a Punjabi girl who was dating a Nigerian guy. And I found it odd because, you know, in our culture, you're not supposed to date anybody out of your own caste. You're not supposed to date somebody. It's like almost like they've got like different levels. If you date or marry somebody who's in a different caste to you, even though my religion's not supposed to have any castes, but they continue to, then that's bad. You know, she married somebody who's a different caste, that's so bad.
Right.
And then if you go off with a Hindu or want to marry a Hindu, that's bad. He's a Hindu, but it's not too bad. Then Muslim is really bad. You know, you should never marry a Muslim person. And it makes me laugh because they're bringing things from generations that have gone past, you know, and they don't understand that we're all one and we were one, and they've got this mentality which has nothing to do with religion again.
Of course.
But they still continue it. They still continue that bias. So, and he was black, which was like the worst, you know, because they're going to sell you, they're going to make you prostitutes. You don't date anybody who's black, they're going to put you on drugs. And I was like, oh God, you know, and I had that stigma, that mental ability to almost be a little bit biased because that's what was programmed in me, that the word you used
At the
earlier.
time, of course, yeah.
So I thought, well, she's, you know, really, oh my gosh, you know, it's kind of bad. And she said, no, he's really nice. And I didn't really speak to him, if I'm being honest, because of the whole finding it hard to speak to men too, and not wanting to, because in my culture I don't want to be disrespectful, so I didn't. And He was actually her manager, not mine. But they were dating, and she said her parents were fine with it. They were going to get married. And I thought, well, okay. And she said, you know what? Things have changed, Nina. You need to go back home. And I'd given myself the name Nina because when I'd got to this large corporation, they could not say my full name. And also it was a boy's name, which I didn't like. So I just said, okay. And one of the guys just went, we'll call you Nina. And I said, I like that. I'm going to use that. So I used it all the time, and I still use it. It sounds feminine, and that's what I am. So that's what I used. And she said, you know what, you go back, they'll love you. And I started to fantasize, and I'm a bit of a still, I'm away with the fairies sometimes. I imagine things that I'm going to go home, my mum's going to pull me in and brush my hair and put oil in my hair the way they used to do to other people. My father's going to protect me and look after me. And I had this imagery in my head, and I so wanted to be loved. And at that time, I used to wear my hair in a really high ponytail. And I went home one day. I looked at my father right in the face as though to say, I'm never coming back. And I left. I was almost defiant. I was almost arrogant. When I left that day, I remember looking at them all thinking, I'm never going to see you guys again. I don't care. You guys have, been horrible. I don't like you. And I walked to work. I remember doing my day job. I did my evening shift. And then I went home, but I went on a bus to my mum's house. And somebody in my community saw me, that she's on the wrong bus. She doesn't go there. She doesn't live off Narborough Road, which is where I'm from, in Leicester. So they told my mum. Somebody had rang her from the phone and said, she's coming. She's coming to your house. And the panic started on the other end. So whilst I'm on this bus fantasizing that I'm going to have nice food,
like a new beginning,
I'm going to make food for everyone, we're all going to sit together. Not that we ever did. We never did that. And I wouldn't have run away because, it's a bad thing. I would have got a bad name. Nobody would want me if I ran away. I couldn't go to the police because we don't go to the police, my culture. We don't ask them for help. I had nobody else to go to. I had no friends. The friend that I'd made told me to go, so I went. And then when I got there, my dad opened the door, and I thought, why is my dad here? It's like 4 or 5 o'clock. Why is he even here? Because my shifts used to be 7 o'clock so I finished quite early. And he grabbed me by my ponytail, literally pulled me in. And the way that I thought I would be pulled in with loving arms isn't the way that I was pulled in. And they just started straight away, took me into the front room. You have a front room for guests and a sitting room. They took me into the same room that I was raped in and started to beat me. And they had obviously decided between them, my brother and my father, my eldest brother, that they were going to kill me. Because the way they were hitting me wasn't the way that they'd hit me before, and I'd been hit many a time. And they literally broke my arm. My brother broke my jaw. And they beat me to the point where I collapsed. And when I collapsed, they started to stamp on me. Really stamp, like with a vengeance, like stomp. And my father held his foot against my throat. And at that point, I know I wasn't in my body anymore, and I was looking at me from the outside in. And I looked like a little rag doll, literally crumpled up and just laying there. And I remember hearing a voice say to me, not yet. And I was saying, no, I want to go. And this voice was saying, it's not your time yet. And when I went back into my body, they were still throwing down huge insults, like, you're in the gutter now, you're a prostitute, we're going to kill you, bury you under the floorboards, you've shamed us, my white turban has been taken. My dad didn't wear a turban, but it's a figurative speech. And I felt terrible because not only was I having these insults thrown upon me and the weight of them, but I felt like I'd really failed as a person. And I was in and out of consciousness. And then my other brother came. He was at university. He turned up and he said, we can't kill her here. We'll take her to India. And they all just left. And I remember my mum's feet walking out, my bobbies, my sister-in-law, and my brother and my other brother. And I was watching their feet because my head was tilted to one side. I couldn't move it. I actually couldn't move it. I thought my neck was broken at one point. And I lay there and I couldn't move. And I remember the light would come, the curtains weren't drawn. I remember day would come, night would come, and I just lay there. I could not move. I soiled myself. Nobody came to check or give me water or see if I was okay. And one day somebody opened the door very slightly, and it was one of my mum's friends that I knew from a young age. Yeah. And she was really nice, and she said, they're going to take you to India. Ask for help at the airport. And she said, they're going to take you, they're going to take you. And she shut the door quickly. And then I heard them in the other room and they were watching TV, you know, and putting films on or something. And I thought, right, I don't know when Sunday is. I don't know what day it is today. What do I do? Do I get up? Can I get up? And then I started having this conversation with myself, which I always did as a child. I was always talking to just me because I had no one else to talk to. And I said that you have to decide whether you just want to die, because a part of me really wanted to die. I'd had enough of living. And I didn't. I broke down the journey in my head into small parts. I knew if I could get to the door, I could reach the handle, I could get to the landing, I could get to the kitchen, and then I'd get over the fence. And I did. I got all the way to the garden, and that's when my dog came and sat next to me. And, you know, a lot of Haitians have Alsatians, and we did as well. But she was my only friend. She was the one that would keep me warm at night because I didn't have a duvet. She's the one that would watch over me at the top of the stairs when I was cooking. I could always see her there. And I begged her and I said to her, don't say anything. Please do not bark. And she looked at me and she looked up. And she looked at me again and then she looked up. And she didn't bark. And I thought, this is a sign that I can do this. And I always say it takes one person to give you just a little bit of confidence or just to reassure you or support. And you don't know the power of that. You know, you don't understand you saying to somebody that says, I can't do this, I'm never going to get well. If you say to them, no, you will. You can do this, that they will then take that on. And I took it on and I somehow got over the fence and I got across the road to safety where I collapsed in a small park. And then the next day I made myself somehow get to a taxi rank. The taxi took me to where I asked them to, which was my friend's, and then I ended up at a police station because my friend wasn't there. And I remember standing at the police station and he said to me, let's take photos of you. I collapsed and he and the taxi driver helped me into a chair and they took photos. You know, the taxi driver had gone. And the policeman, as soon as I said honour killing, when he said what happened, wasn't interested. He just sort of went, well, let's just get you to a hospital. There's no need for you to be here. And I said, oh, but you were filling a form. And he said, yeah, well, we'll get to that. Don't worry. Let's get you out of here. And it's in Market Harbour. It's like a small little white British town, very quiet, nothing much happens still. And I ended up in Kettering Hospital for months, you know. And I know it was months because people would come, people would go. And I used to watch people, you know, I used to watch the little boy at the end, his mum would bring him comics and, you know, grapes. And I learned how you're supposed to treat somebody in hospital by watching others. But I also knew that when that 7:00 time came and visitors were coming, nobody was coming to see Nina. You know, even the nurses didn't give me the time. The nurses would almost look at my file and throw it down. The doctors didn't give me time because I was the one that nobody wanted from the beginning. So I just felt like this is just the way it's supposed to be. Who wants me? You know, I didn't understand that they were supposed to give me care. They were supposed to ask me questions, that I was entitled to services that should have been provided for me, should have been put in place from a safeguarding aspect, but nothing was ever done.
Why is that? Why would the hospital?
My file had a big yellow sticker that said attempted honour killing. So every time they would come, they would literally throw it down and just walk away. So the nurses would do the observations, check my blood pressure and everything. But my arm was my hip had been displaced. So I was there because they were correcting it. And I've tried to get my records. But apparently because they were on paper, I can't because they weren't digitalised then.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Have you ever tried to, since you left, did you ever reach back out to your parents or brothers or anyone?
Have they tried contacting you?
Yeah, my brother contacted me. I ended up going to find my friend, you know, because I came out of hospital, I had nowhere to go, and I thought I'll go find my Indian friend. She told me where she lived. But when I got there, she'd actually left the guy and said that he said, oh, she's gone to have an arranged marriage because she decided that's what she wanted. I think her parents probably forced her. He said I could stay at his house. He had a 2-bedroom flat. And I thought, well, he's my hero. He's my saviour. He's given me a place to live. But he then later on took me to a party where he was giving me Coke. I'd never even had Coke before in my life. I didn't know the difference between Coke and Pepsi. You could just give me orange, fizzy orange, and I would have thought that was Coke. I had no idea. You know, my childhood and life had never allowed me to drink a fizzy drink. Yeah. And he was actually lacing it with alcohol, and I didn't know. So when I got back that evening, I don't remember anything until later on when I realised he'd raped me and I was pregnant. And then I didn't focus, because this is a habit of mine. I don't focus on the negatives necessarily. I'll focus on a positive. And I thought, I want this selfishly. I want a child because it gives me a reason to be alive. Because I had no direction. I had no desire to live. I was literally putting one foot in front of the other, and I was just living, you know, but not really. I was existing, I guess, not living. And having this child meant I had something that belonged to me nobody could take. But I didn't understand you're supposed to date somebody or love somebody. I didn't know what love was.
Yeah.
I didn't know about going on
Like
dinner dates.
Yeah.
I asked him to marry me. He said I wasn't good enough. I wanted the same surname, obviously, as the children. And I stayed with him for 23 years. And in those 23 years, I created businesses because I wanted to give my kids everything I didn't have. My mum had taught me how not to be a mum, so I did everything that I wished she had done for me, for my daughter. And I felt my daughter was a sign that I could break this generational curse almost of not celebrating a girl. So I told her when she was born that she would have everything. She would have everything. I even took her to a temple in Northamptonshire to get her blessed. I felt that she was the making of me. And I went on to have a son. And by the time I had a son, I'd bought a house. I was paying off the mortgage really quickly. I'd bought a shop, a small shop. I had ideas that I was going to provide this, that, and the other. You know, my business side of me was really kicking in, and my ex-partner didn't do anything. He just sat around, and I was fine with that because I didn't know that he was supposed to provide, because no one had provided for me or cared for me. So he was at the pub all the time, or he was with other people, but that's what my father was doing. So why would I question it? And who was I? In my own mind, I was nobody, but I was a mother. And I knew that I was a good mother, and I was enjoying that. I went on to get pregnant for the third time because I have this thing about number 3. I don't know why it is, but I've got a thing about number 3s. And he was getting quite fed up, my ex-partner. He was saying, I really don't like you. No, man, you know, I actually feel sick when I'm with you sometimes. You're so repulsive, and I just don't want to be around you, and I don't want another baby after this, and I wish you would just stop, you know. And he'd moved out of my room, you know. I wasn't sleeping in the same room, so we didn't have a normal relationship. But I didn't know what normal was. And I got pregnant for the third time, and he was going away to Italy, and he wanted to take lots of money with him because he liked to show people that he had lots of money. And I didn't have it. You know, my daughter had gone on a little sleepover to a friend's house, and I had my youngest son. He was about 10 months old, and I was pregnant. You know, I was 8 months pregnant. And I said to him, I haven't got the money. I was upstairs, I was walking down, and he pushed me because he had this habit of pushing. And when I fell, I ended up falling on my stomach. And he left. He picked his suitcase and left. And I managed to crawl to the phone to call the people that I used to rent from to say, can you help me by looking after my son? I think I need to go to the hospital, because I could feel something, and I felt it was a foot maybe. And miraculously, whether it was a good or bad thing, my old school friend who was Greek, she'd been trying to get hold of me for a long time, but my ex-partner wasn't allowing me to see anyone. I wasn't allowed to see anybody. And she turned up. She just turned up. And it was really strange that she did, because she took me to the hospital. You know, she went in the ambulance with me. She was there when I gave birth, because I gave birth to a beautiful little boy who's perfect. But whilst everyone else's baby was crying, mine stopped breathing because of the injuries he'd sustained. So Tyler died, literally minutes after he was born. And at that moment, I just stopped everything. My body just shut down. My mind shut down. I didn't even care that I had 2 other children. I didn't care people relied on me for their wages. I just wanted to say to the world, will you please just stop? Because something really bad's happened. And I remember lying there holding him. And I felt the world was a really cruel place. That all these other babies are crying in the same ward. That no one's moved me or thought. And they were saying, let's take him away. And I just wanted to hold him. So that was probably my worst moment. And when I did leave, I was very different. You know, I could smile through anything. I wanted my kids to grow up never seeing me cry, because if you cry, you're weak, right?
Yeah.
We're told to roll up our sleeves and get on with it and not be upset, you know, not be weak. And I just really became like a zombie. I just couldn't function. My ex-partner was getting really angry because I wasn't working, and people wanted to see me at work and they were turning up and I wasn't there. And you know, that time I used to start new brands, really successful brands for other people, and they would come. I just didn't want to know. And I begged him. I said, I want another baby, because I felt like I had to replace what I'd lost in a way. And I begged God. You know, I remember sitting at the patio door or looking out into our garden, begging, looking up, saying, just give me back what you took. I want it back. I want him back. And I ended up getting pregnant very quickly, and I did have a baby boy, and he was fine, you know, and he kind of gave me a reason to even breathe again, because I was quite happy suffocating myself in my own grief. You know, I didn't ever go to sleep without having a really wet pillow. It was just such a down time. When you become that depressed, it's a really difficult place to pull yourself out of. And I struggled, I'll be honest, even struggled when I had my new baby, because I'd lost so much. And the relationship was getting very volatile. My daughter, you know, later on went to university. She is a biomedical scientist, but she's also a dentist. And she was doing her first degree, because I don't think she ever wanted to stop studying. But she was at university, and she would come back and say, it's not normal. Our house is not normal. It shouldn't be like this. This is not how people behave with each other. And she would argue with her dad. So he stopped her coming back. He said, you can't come back home and you can't speak to your mum. So we would have our phones put on a table every night at 6 o'clock when I'd get back from work. And he would watch me on CCTV where I was. My car would be tracked. If I went into a shop, I had to show the receipt. So we knew exactly where I was at what time. We were on FaceTime day in, day out. The boys couldn't go anywhere. They were playing football at a really high level. And he literally controlled our lives to a point where there was no freedom. There was just, you know, we were doing things, but we weren't really allowed to express ourselves or be who we wanted to be. And sometimes if he went away, I would blast the music, and I'd put sometimes Indian music on, you know, and dance.
Yeah.
Or I'd try to make my children have as much fun as possible.
Yeah.
And if I was upset, I would disguise it with a smile, because I wanted them just to remember me smiling, which is wrong, because children need to understand emotions.
Of course.
But my other son, my middle child, he started to stand up to his dad when he was 16 and said that you can't speak to mummy like that. Because he used to have a habit of taking me to the kitchen and beating me there. But I think when you can't see what's happening, it's almost amplified. That you start to imagine it's worse than it possibly is, even though it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were struggling. Both boys mentally were struggling. And I sent my son to boarding school thinking, you know what, I'll just send him away. That's a solution. It wasn't a solution really, because he was going to end up having problems because I sent him away, you know. And
Of course.
he was then going to feel that, what have I done wrong? I wanted to protect my mum, and I've done nothing wrong. And my plan, you know, I had this stupid plan that I would send my youngest as well. But as soon as I moved one, they were so close, like the two of you really. And he lost his buffer. He no longer had his friend. He no longer had that. They played in the academy together. They went training together. They would do their workouts in the gym together. They did everything together. And suddenly he was left on his own, and he became very, very sick. He developed an autoimmune disease and ended up in hospital. And I ended up looking after him all the time in hospital and working from hospital, to a point where, you know, they said it's a disability. And his father said in front of him, it's not my child. He must be someone else's kid, because he's not mine. I can't have given birth to somebody with a disability. And he didn't come and see him in the hospital once. And the nurses would ask me where he is. And I said that he's, working. He wasn't working. My daughter managed to come all the way from London when she was studying to give me a bit of support, because he had quite a big operation. I was worried because it was very touch and go at one point. But his father just didn't ever turn up. So my son was very sick, and when we came out of hospital, my daughter received a picture message on her phone, and it said, "I'm sorry," and it was from her father. He'd sent a message, and on this picture message, I'm asleep on the sofa, and I didn't sleep because I had insomnia from my pillow being set on fire. And her brother was slumped on a table, and she knew there was something instantly wrong. She'd always said when I would drop her messages that she's going to end up getting a message one day that I'm dead. So she knew instantly something was wrong. She didn't call the police, and people say, why didn't she call the police? But when you're in a situation like that, you don't know what to do yourself. But she called every phone in the house. She called the landline. She called my mobile, my son's mobile. And in the end, I answered one of the landlines, and I took the phone and said, my throat is really sore. And I went to the kitchen and said, let me get some water. And when I went to get the water, I'm filling up the cup, and I turn and I see each tap is turned on the gas stove, and the whole house was full of gas. No. And people say you can't die like that, but you can. We had obviously passed out from the fumes, and if we'd woken up later to put the light on, the house would have exploded. And from there, my son spoke out and said what had happened. He just couldn't cope anymore. He was struggling mentally. He just could not deal with it. And he was very brave to tell his school, but because they went to an independent school, it was even worse because they took it so much more serious. It was very quick.
Of course.
We had been removed very quickly with nothing. We took nothing. We literally I had the coat on my back, and he had just his clothes. And we ended up in this really squalor of a place where they put us as a safe home. The walls were covered in human feces. The carpet was sodden with urine. And I thought to myself, where have I brought my kid? You know, I've left this 7-bedroom house that I've literally built, and now where am I without a penny? I didn't understand about meters. I had no money to fill it. We had no hot water, no light. And I wrapped him up in my coat and lay him down, and I actually went in the other room, and that was the first time I'd actually cried. I didn't worry about anybody, and how I felt was that I wanted to let it out, and I let it out. And I always say that I said to myself, Nina, what are you going to do? Are you going to drown in your tears, or are you going to dance in them? And I decided I would dance in them. And some weird thing was that I felt free suddenly. I felt almost that this is not where I want to be, but it's a step towards it.
Absolutely.
And I knew that I had to do it for him. I couldn't let him down. I wanted that same standard of life for him. And we became homeless, like I said, about 7 years ago, because I was on paper a millionaire. Well, most of the money was in bricks and mortar or machinery. But, you know, I was the millionaire. So the government said, I can't help you, you can't claim anything. So we ended up with nothing, nowhere to live. But someone took me in, Nikki, she's an angel, that's what I call her.
Bless Nikki.
Yeah, and she, Nikki Bliss, we stayed with her, and eventually we found our way. And my son struggled with mental health. He became very suicidal. It's hard for young men to talk about how they really feel, which is why I work with young men now, because I want them to understand that from a maternal point of view, that they should ask for help. There's no weakness in asking. Absolutely. I always say it's in your weakest times you find your strengths. And I set up a non-profit, and because of my sister, I started speaking out. And as I said I would do 100 messages. When I got to 90, I was giving up. You know, I didn't want to do it anymore because I was getting 2 or 3 views, and it was a difficult conversation nobody wanted to have. But I decided I would continue because I'm stubborn. And I got to 97, and people were ringing me. I was away at the time, and they were saying, you've just got to 15 million views in less than 48 hours. And I didn't understand what they were saying. And when I got back, it reached 25 million views, and now it's over 50 million. And it's a 20-minute video that just seemed to evoke a lot of emotion from people. But there's a lot of non-profits out there that get funded by the government, and I don't like non-profits that don't do what they say they're going to do. I call them out. I'd gone to these non-profits and asked for help, got the paper trail, and they never helped me. And I set up my own non-profit so that nobody would be turned away the way I was. And out of that 50 million people, 14,000 came forward saying, I need help. I'm in England, I'm Punjabi, or I'm Muslim, or I'm Hindu, and I'm suffering. And people said, it doesn't happen anymore, but it does. It's still happening on your doorstep, you just don't see it. Gender-based violence is still very rife in our community. Bristol University released a paper this year that said that arranged marriages, forced marriages are really bad. You know, they're still happening, but they don't get reported. I'm not a statistic, so I don't count because I never reported anything. Or when I tried to, nobody took notice of what I was saying. I decided I could either work against the police or with them. So I'm now on 2 advisory boards at Scotland Yard, and I'm vocal. You know, if I say something, I say it with pure passion.
Passion, yeah.
Good, yeah, of course.
Because sometimes there's too many yes people, and I'm definitely not one of them. I found my voice after a long time because I found me, as I was saying to you earlier, when I was 50, I was in London. I was forced to move very far away from my hometown, which is Leicester, and the country, which is where I grew up. And I found me I was grounding, and I decided, right, I get to decide who I am. I get to decide whether I'm fat and ugly. And I knew that I'd never hurt anyone. My father didn't teach me to ride a bike, but he taught me to love unconditionally. And I knew that I'd brought that forward. And I suddenly had this huge amount of love in me, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I decided I would give it out to everybody else. And everyone that comes in contact with me will say, I know from my heart that I have no bad intention, only to help them, to let them see what I see, that they are 2 amazing people. And my daughter's part of my non-profit. She helps people with their confidence.
Bless her.
I have somebody called Amanda. She's in Ireland, actually, and she helps with starting again. She's amazing, Amanda Rafferty. And our non-profit's called End Honour Killings, because I just say it as I see it. People said, don't you want to give it a nice name like Nina? And I said, no, because that's what it
Go
is.
straight to the point.
Go straight to the point, yeah.
It's
Let them know
difficult
what
to
it
hear
is.
it, but
Yeah.
that's what it is. And I am in the process of getting laws reworded so that they're not called honour killings, because my TED talk is called There's No Honour in Killing, and there is no honour in killing. And I want the word honour to be taken out of it so that it's just a killing, because what happened to me was an attempted murder. It wasn't anything less. With my sister, it was either a murder or attempted murder. I won't know. So if I can do that, then victims in the future will stand more of a chance to get more of a conviction and the justice they deserve.
They deserve.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
Well, Nina, it's been great speaking to you. Very difficult at times. I'm sure everyone's already said that to you. But just before we go, is there like a last message for anyone that's going through something similar who needs to come out, or after watching you builds that courage to come out?
Amazing courage.
Because it's not easy, honestly. Even listening to it, I thought, we'd have a really basic chat, but I've actually lost my whole mark. I've lost my head.
Honestly.
Listening to it from from directly sitting opposite you, it's been harder than I ever imagined. So just a message for people who are watching, who may need that push and that courage and that voice.
Yeah. I mean, this is not a pity party. I've started saying that a lot recently. I'm not here for you to get upset. I don't want people to be upset. I'm living a very peaceful, meaningful life.
Yeah.
I'm living a life of seva, purpose. I'm doing what I want to do. If I want to go and have a cup of coffee, I can. If I want a cup of tea, I get to choose now. But this little freedom, these little things mean so much. And I want everyone to live like that. Everyone should live in a world where they're not scared. They're not walking on eggshells. So the hardest thing for anybody out there struggling with anything is to ask for help and to confide in someone that you trust. And it's hard to trust. I still struggle with trust, I'll be honest. But I want people to know that anything's possible. I now coach UFC fighters, MMA fighters, some top names that I can't even mention. But you can search on my Instagram and find them. But I coach them because I get them. I get that struggle of when you're knocked down and you can't get up. It's your mind that gets you up. I've done it. When I had all my bones broken, I got myself up. I also understand trauma and how it holds you back. And people say, think out of the box, but there is no box. You create the box, you create the jail. My room was my jail. It was my cell until I decided I was no longer going to step. Those words that other people inflicted upon me, that I was fat and ugly and I could do nothing, they were their words, not mine. You create your own vocabulary. You create who you want to be. And everything is possible. I believe I could teach anybody to make money now. I've written a best-selling book, and I didn't write a book about me. I wrote a self-help book because all of the lessons I learned, I wanted somebody else to get there before me, because we should help one another.
Absolutely agree.
Unfortunately, the world is so happy to bring everybody down or have arguments about senseless things that we forget about compassion. I'm trying to inject as much compassion into the police, which is difficult, believe me, because they are almost desensitized to caring. But if we can give one person an act of kindness rather than liking random people's Instagram posts and getting into conflicts that we shouldn't be getting into, you could probably make a big difference. And my son recently, he decided he was that week going to contact everybody that he hadn't spoken to for a month or so. And it was beautiful watching him video calling his friends. It was so beautiful.
Of course.
And I was proud. But why can't we all do that? Why can't we sit opposite the person in a bus or a train and say, hey, how are you?
Yeah, how's
Instead
your
of
day
looking
going?
the other
Yeah,
way
yeah.
or holding our phone and crouching down looking at some pointless thing. It's like my bodyguard sitting over there. Kevin says, if your phone's not making you money, you shouldn't have it in your hand, which is true.
Well said, Kev.
Thank you.
You know? But we've become accustomed to not really focusing on what's important, which is you and you.
absolutely.
We're all one. So I would really request for everybody out there listening just to get a bit of love to someone today.
That's
And that
amazing,
point,
man.
what a lovely message.
I feel motivated now as well
Yeah.
from just that speech. You know,
I'm a motivational
that's
speaker.
right.
Of course. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that very tense and emotional journey for me personally.
100%.
So if you like what you saw, guys, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe.
And hit the bell notification so you don't miss none of our uploads.
And finally, before we do leave, there will be a full caption. The caption below, all of Nina's links, all her previous podcasts, the work that she's doing right now. So you can make sure you check that out.
Take care.
Peace.